The truth behind the monostat craze is the fact that the majority of black women have yeast infections, and not in the hoo-ha, but of the scalp. And today I'm going to break down how you adding oils, greases, butters, your blue magic, your pink oil moisturizer, your hot 6 oil, all of these different things are feeding the natural yeast that lives on your scalp. So let's break it down and talk about it. Malassezia yeast is a genus of lipophilic yeast. Lipophilic means that it is fat loving. It loves fat. Now remember that the other bacteria that I give you, some of them love low oxygen, but this one in particular loves fat. Now, it is a part of the skin's natural microbiota, so this is not an invader or anything like that. All of the different forms of bacteria and yeast that we'll be going over in this series are a part of your natural army, right? So don't be afraid. What you need to be afraid of, or what you need to pay attention to, are the methods that you can follow to keep them controlled so they do not overcolonize. So let's get into it. This yeast thrives in oily and moist environments, and this is the environment. Oily and a oily and moist environment is the environment that this yeast needs for its metabolic properties. And what does that mean? Its unique metabolic properties are what is required for this form of yeast to grow. So basically, without this environment, without a oily and moist environment, this form of yeast does not have the things that it needs to reproduce. So let's keep going. Number 1 is going to be sebum production. Now, this one myth has flowered into something so crazy, right? And it has flowered into hundreds of products, billions of dollars being spent on hair products for one lie, and that is the simple lie that black women or women with naturally curly hair scalp does not produce oil. And that could not be further from the truth. And today we're going to prove it, because all of these different forms of yeast and bacteria, one thing that they all have in common, they are all there for the sebum. So how can all of this bacteria be there for sebum that doesn't exist? That's interesting. The sebum is amazing. It contains triglycerides, cholesterol, wax esters, amino acids, and so many other things. Did you know that the sebum that is coming out of your scalp actually has antibacterial and antimicrobial properties that help you to control the yeast and bacteria on the scalp? So you need sebum, but when it overgrows, it feeds the yeast, because the yeast is using that oil too. It metabolizes it and turns it into food. This yeast secretes lipase enzymes. So what do these enzymes do? Now, the lipase enzymes break down the triglycerides inside of sebum, and they turn them into food, and they turn it into free fatty acids, and those free fatty acids are then utilized for the growth and reproduction of this yeast. So girl. Number 2 is going to be humidity and moisture. Now, we think that leaving your hair wet is keeping your hair moisturized, but it is not. It is producing the perfect environment for yeast and bacteria. Let's talk about how this yeast loves it. Now, moisture, like water, adding water to the scalp, or different products that contain water to the scalp, what it does, it helps to maintain the lipid barrier of the scalp. And that is something that you really not supposed to do, right? Like that. And it makes the perfect environment for this yeast. Humidity increases the water content of your skin, creating an amazing, favorable environment for this yeast. It loves it. Next up is going to be your sweat. Your sweat that is coming out of your scalp naturally when you sleep, right? Sweat is water, and it is also going to contribute to that lipid barrier over the skin, making an amazing environment for this yeast. And sweating is something that's going to happen every day, all day, like even through little actions. That's why keeping the scalp clean is something that everybody needs to do. Now, number 3, the scalp's warm temperature is conducive to this yeast growing out of control. So when you add oil that is feeding it, and moisture which is creating that barrier, on to temperatures, then what is going to happen is you're really going to see a difference. If you didn't sit under a dryer, right, and you just walked around with conditioner on your head with the plastic cap on top of it, you would feel that your body heat is like warming it up. You can kind of deep condition yourself without a dryer, to be all like truth be told, and that is because of your natural body heat. So when you leave the hair wet, your natural body heat plus the water plus the oil and the different forms of bacteria that are being released and the other bacteria that are there create a perfect environment. It's like the best freaking petri dish right on your scalp. If you guys want to get deeper, if you guys want to get a little bit deeper into, oh my god, this is a lipophilic form of yeast, which means that it is fat loving. Its favorite food to metabolize are fats. So there are so many people who use different oils and butters and things of that nature, and after they use these oils and butters, they start noticing like that the itching, the burning, and different things of that nature didn't even start until after they started using different oils and different butters on the scalp. Well, that is because before you start using oils and butters, most likely you had a normal flow of bacteria, or your microbiome was normal, but because you've changed the environment of your scalp and your hair shaft, it makes things a little more flighty, right? Because if you have practices where you're leaving your hair wet, or you're letting your hair air dry because you don't use blow dryers, and you are also adding oil and grease to the scalp, a lot of people think that there's a difference between oil in the scalp and grease in the scalp and adding butters. At the end of the day, they're all fats, right? They're all fats, they're all clogging. Even if something isn't comedogenic, right? Let's say an oil isn't comedogenic, and comedogenic means it doesn't block the pores or it doesn't block the follicle. Just because it doesn't block just because it doesn't block the pore and just because it doesn't block the follicle does not mean that it is not increasing the levels of inflammation in the scalp. Remember, I told you that different scalp disorders don't just happen. First there's a trigger, then there's inflammation, and then there's something like seborrheic dermatitis. When you look around on social media, the majority of women with curly hair from a really young age, everybody has dandruff. Nobody understands why, and even now, all of the different products that you're buying are so you can control dandruff. But guess what? You are causing your own dandruff yourself just from the different oils and butters that you're putting on your scalp, right? So in theory, oils like olive oil and almond oil and coconut oil and things of that nature are good, right? Not so much coconut oil, but for sure olive oil, almond oil, and a couple of other oils that are here on the screen, they all have oleic acid in it, and oleic acid is great in some forms, and a lot of people don't have allergies to it, but a lot of people do, right? A lot of people have skin sensitivities to it, and this is the thing that you need to know. When you have these different forms of yeast and bacteria that are on the scalp, right, they eat and they metabolize, and when they eat and metabolize, they boo-boo, right? And they boo-boo out different fatty acids, and this one fatty acid that bacteria poops out, like it'll eat the sebum that is on your scalp, and then it poops out oleic acid. And so the oleic acid, it creates an allergic reaction. On some people, it creates inflammation. So then when the inflammation is created, your white blood cells, your T cells, your whole body goes off. Your body starts to release cortisol, and then you have an overproduction of sebum. That overproduction of sebum happens, it throws off your skin cell turnover cycle. So instead of you turning over skin, and your skin cell turnover cycle happens every 28 days, where your dead skin cells die off and then the new ones make their way up. But when you are putting things like, when you are putting certain oils and butters on your scalp, right, it's not that the oils and butters are breaking you out. No, you have living organisms on your scalp. They metabolize and they convert the different oils and butters that you eat into food, and then they poop out different acids, different polypeptide chains, different amino acids that turn into proteins, and then it all lives within the follicle. This is why you have to shampoo shampoo on a regular basis. And this is what is happening on the human scalp. This form of yeast is magnificent, it's powerful, and the more you feed it, the stronger it's gonna get. The more favorable the environment of your scalp is for this bacteria, the more of it is going to come. It literally, you putting oils, butters, and grease in your scalp literally help the different forms of yeast and bacteria to metabolize, colonize, and reproduce. It's a fact. By you simply fixing your scalp's normal microbiota, you won't have a problem with that. If you balance everything out, you won't have an imbalance. Again, another overgrowth of this yeast leads to folliculitis. In this video here, go watch it. When this is over, I'll teach you all about folliculitis and the certain habits that lead to the breakage and the thinning and the redness and the white bumps. Like, if you go to somebody, there's so many people that, like, let's say you'll go to a braider that puts a whole lot of like grease and butters and stuff on your scalp, and then you get home and you have white bumps in your hair. Well, most people think that those white bumps come from their braids being too tight. No, baby, the braids being too tight isn't what's causing those little white bumps. What's causing those little white bumps is all the edge control, all the grease, all the oils, and all the butters that you are putting in between the scalp. Like, it is an overproduction. It's inflammation of the hair's follicle, and that is folliculitis. Pictures right here. Watch the video. A lot of people love to argue with me about it, and a lot of people don't want to hear it, but it is the truth. You do not have to take my word for it, but I really recommend that you do your own research, because I don't think that the problem is that you guys haven't been doing your research, but you guys have been doing your research with people who don't have enough data for you to compact on together. For the most part, the information on social media is just a whole bunch of people just guessing, making up stuff, and then then when you get online, you just kind of compile the stuff that they done made up, put it together, and make up something else. But the truth never really has to be explained, and once you understand the science of the human body, all of the pieces fix, and it's so easy. Having a healthy hair routine is so freaking easy. There are several scalp and follicle disorders that are caused by the overgrowth of this yeast. We already talked about dandruff, folliculitis, seborrheic dermatitis. Pityriasis versicolor is another one that is caused by an overproduction of this yeast. And what this is basically just a little bit of hyperpigmentation is what this is. But it is caused, one of the main causes is an overproduction of yeast. This yeast can really interfere with the natural pigment of your skin by interfering with the production of melanin within your skin. So some people, I would have clients sometimes, and they would notice a difference in the color of their scalp and the color of their skin sometimes when they have certain diets that reduce and kill these forms of yeast, because there are also certain diets that lead to this. Sometimes you could be doing everything right as it pertains to your hair and like your patterns and stuff, but if what's going on the inside of your body isn't working out, it doesn't matter. You can have an overgrowth of yeast on the inside of your body. Everything happens from the inside out, not from the outside in. So if there's an overproduction of yeast and bacteria on the scalp, 9 times out of 10 you have an overproduction of yeast and bacteria within the body. But don't worry about it, because I have something for you that's gonna fix it up real good. But these are the things that cause the inflammation. Yes, the yeast is good in fair amounts when you're keeping your scalp clean and you're washing your hair on a regular basis and you're not oiling and greasing it up. Just know that the thing that irritates the scalp is everything that you put in your hair. The yeast that is in your scalp is going to metabolize whatever you put on your scalp, and then it is going to turn it into food, poop it out, and then those byproducts are going to be the things that cause different forms of inflammation. And then if your solution to these feelings, right, to these feelings of the inflammation, to these results of inflammation, most of the time your solution is more oil. So you just give it even more, and it sounds like it calmed down, but what you gonna do if you got an attitude because you hungry and then somebody feeds you? You gonna sit down and stop yelling too? That's all that happened. Overgrowth of this bacteria is going to widely affect your skin's barrier, making it so much more susceptible to damage, to breakage, and to invasion. Like, you're going to have scalp infections so much more often than you normally would just by you skipping over the shampooing process. I'm telling you, like, we have all of these hacks and all of these things, but the number one hack and the most useful thing that you can do to your hair is just washing it. I swear to God, just wash it. So there are a couple of things that you can do to manage it, right? You can get antifungal shampoo, and most of the time different forms of antifungal shampoo will really help you to manage it. But remember, you cannot use antifungal shampoo and then turn around and feed the fungus. Like, oh my God, if you use an antifungal shampoo to kill the fungus that is overgrown in your scalp, to kill the yeast that is overgrown in your scalp, you use an antifungal shampoo. Then after you use that antifungal shampoo, you've been listening to people, my hair dry, I need oil. And then you go put oil in it. You literally just clean all of the old bacteria off, and then you fed it to make it more powerful again. It literally makes no sense. You're supposed to be starving the bacteria, starving the yeast. I get so many women, like more people than I can count. I love y'all, but that's why my books are closed, because until we break the brainwash that the Team Natural community has y'all under, dermatologists cannot help, trichologists cannot help, no one will be able to help. Because if you have sebum, now that we were talking about this, most of the scalp disorders that you guys have is connected to an overproduction of sebum, right? And this is because the women who are using oils, greases, and butters in the scalp are only doing it because somebody put them under the illusion that their scalp does not produce oil. So by you constantly oiling and greasing the scalp, all you're doing is causing an over colonization of all of the forms of yeast and bacteria that is already in the scalp. This is something that I need you to understand. Your inflammation, like people will be like,
oh, I went to this one girl when I was
like, y'all will be like 56 years old. You'll be like,
oh my God, I went to this one girl when I was like 15 and my scalp been burning ever since.
it's like, okay, but okay, so what are your patterns? What are your daily patterns? And then it'll be like,
oh, well, I don't do nothing to my hair. All I do, I co-wash and then I use conditioner, or, I don't use conditioner because I'm like washing with the conditioner, or I use a sulfate-free shampoo and then I sleep in the conditioner, or I leave a little bit of the conditioner in my head, and then that's it. I just put a bunch of almond oil on my hair. I put a bunch of almond oil on my hair, and then that's it. And then that's it. But for the life of me, I cannot figure out why my hair keeps flaking and why I can't get rid of my dandruff.
Well, my baby, the reason that you can't get rid of your dandruff is because every time you wash your hair, which is supposed to be removing you're supposed to be removing all of the excess oil, all of the bacteria, all of the toxins, to weaken some of the bacteria forms and some of the yeast and all of the other forms that live on your scalp. You're supposed to be weakening it by removing the shampoo, drying it out, and then letting the sebum come back naturally on its own. But you make the process way worse, because instead of you cleaning the scalp off and letting the sebum come out on its own, you clean the scalp off and then take a scoop of Blue Magic and put it on your scalp. It is literally insanity. That's why it's so important for you to understand hair holistically and not just look at it like,
ooh, that's cute. It smells good. It made my fingers slippery. It gave me slip. This is good.
no, it don't. That's not how you determine of whether or not a product is good. Different topical creams and things prescribed by a dermatologist will work, but this is the thing. Most women go to see a dermatologist, and most of my sisters, black women, I'm talking to you, most black women go to see a dermatologist that say, I have seborrheic dermatitis, or I have dandruff, or whatever is an overproduction of oil, because the majority of them are all stemmed from an overproduction of oil, right? And like we talked about, the the yeast that lives on the scalp. You have an overproduction of oil, it goes crazy eating it, and then it boo-boos out different fatty acids that irritate the scalp, right? You go in to see your dermatologist. What your dermatologist has done, the dermatologist has looked at your scalp under a microscope. They've done a skin biopsy, most likely. They know exactly what's there and how much of it is overgrown. So then they give you an antibiotic or something for your scalp to go ahead and fix the problem. But then you rinse it out and you like,
oh my god, it makes my hair dry, so I don't like it.
oh my god, it's supposed to make your hair dry. If you have an overproduction of oil, a dermatologist is going to prescribe something to slow down the oil production long enough to kill these mites and to drain out and to starve all of these forms of bacteria that need the sebum to survive. So yes, when you go to a dermatologist because you have an overproduction of whatever the different form of bacteria or yeast or mites and things of that nature are, you guys will not listen to your dermatologist. And I know a lot of people are not going to want to hear this, but it's the truth. And it's the main reason that I'm no longer taking one-on-one consultations, because if you're not listening to a dermatologist that was in school for 15 years, you definitely not listening to me, because I didn't go to medical school. So that is something that I really want you guys to pay attention to. The majority of you already have the solution, but because a dermatologist's scientific solution didn't match the mental perception that you have in your head for what hair is supposed to feel like or how slippery hair is supposed to feel, then you don't know. You think that this person can help you, where in reality that dermatologist is your best bet. When you have this form of yeast that overgrows to a certain extent, right? I'm going to give you some things that you could do at home, right? But when it has reached a certain extent to the point where you are noticing like big huge bald spots, go see your dermatologist. Follow their directions. Yes, your scalp is going to feel dry. It's supposed to. It is drying out your overproduction of sebum, and it is also starving and killing all of those different forms of yeast and bacteria. It's like chemotherapy before your follicles, right? With chemotherapy, they end up like killing a bunch of cells and cells that you do need, right? That's why your hair falls out and your skin and so many other things are happening, because to target this cell, to target these cancer cells, they have to kill a whole lot of other important cells in the body as well. So it's literally the same. I'm not comparing cancer in any way, shape, or form to like hair care, but it's like the same type of concept, right? I really hope that makes sense. That literally the easiest way to control all of these different forms of yeast and bacteria is by simply washing your hair on a regular basis. It is the easiest thing to do. Wash your hair on a regular basis. Don't put oils, greases, and butters on your scalp. Oils, grease, and butter do not go on the scalp ever. Like in the shop, they not learn how to do that. You don't put it on the scalp. You do like grease in the scalp and oil in the scalp. I'm sorry, those are things that you do at home before you go to cosmetology school. Once I went to cosmetology school, I came home and I was like, oh mommy, we not supposed to put oil on our scalp because it is. And mama was like, oh girl, shoot, okay, I didn't send you to school to learn something. And that was the end of it. Lastly is going to be managing some of your underlying conditions. Most of the time, some people could be doing everything right. You're not doing any of the things I talk about. You're not greasing your scalp, you don't leave your hair wet, and you wash your hair on a regular basis. But the next question you have to ask yourself is, how is your diet, and can things in your diet change? Head over to my blog, and on my blog I have a list of different fruits and vegetables that you can eat that completely really knock down the overgrowth of yeast within your body. I have a list of foods on the website that you shouldn't eat that increase the levels of yeast within your body, and the foods that you should eat to decrease it. But let's have a word from this video sponsor, Simple Apothecary. Now, Simple Apothecary is my baby. Today, we're going to be talking about how oregano extract can completely kill all of the extra forms of yeast and different forms of bacteria on the inside of the body and on the scalp in a really easy way, the long way. So let's hop into it. These are the two key constituents of oregano, and they are freaking amazing. Now in this video here, I go really deep into oregano, even deeper, so make sure you go watch that video as soon as this video is over. But we're gonna talk about what oregano does to yeast in the body and on the scalp. These two compounds end up inserting themselves into the cell membrane of yeast, of different yeast and fungi. These compounds insert themselves into the lipid barrier of different yeast and fungi. This makes the cells weaker and weaker, which ends up leading to the leakage of vital cell content within these fungi, including ions and other small membranes that end up leading to the cell death. Like literally, basically, in short, right? When you use oregano, what oregano does, it literally take a little shank to the cell and make a bunch of little holes in it, till eventually everything leaks out till it just shrivels up and dies. Like, that's what it does. I'm so mad I just made a fake shank. Effectively compromising the cell membrane of the yeast, it makes it so that it can no longer survive, it can no longer reproduce or anything, so the fungus naturally dies, and of course you gotta wash it off. This compound right here is crucial for cell membranes of fungus. It's really similar to what cholesterol is in humans. So when the cell membrane is disrupted and that leaks out, like, now what's great about oregano, it can really slow down or completely stop the synthesis of this compound. So if the synthesis is slowed down and stopped altogether, then the fungus doesn't even have a chance to exist. Like, it's literally disrupting their whole ecosystem. Without this, the fungi cannot maintain its structure or function. It literally just breaks down and dies. Next up is going to be ROS properties, and this is what it stands for, and this is what it does. Now these two can produce a reactive species of fungi within the cell. The increased levels ROS can widely increase the levels of oxidative stress within these yeast cells, right? So if it's disrupting the membranes, then it's not going to be alive for too much longer. The levels cause damage to all of the cell's components, like the cell's DNA, its proteins, and its lipids. So it literally destroys its whole ecosystem. This oxidative stress causes even further damage to the cell membrane of yeast, causing its immediate death. Number 4 is going to be interference with biofilm formation. Now what you guys don't understand is the more product you put on the scalp, the more you feed these forms of yeast and bacteria with oils and greases and butters, the more powerful you make them. And when I say the more powerful you make them, that is exactly what I mean. As it takes the different proteins and different lipids from these oils and metabolizes them, it ends up using it. Like, your body is really smart, so it ends up using those things to its advantage, and it creates a lipid barrier which protects it, right? It ends up making it really hard for a lot of different forms of antibiotics to work. And this is the thing, a lot of people will say, oh, I went to my dermatologist, but what they gave me didn't work. Well, that's because sometimes you need something a little more stronger, because you are feeding. Y'all don't understand that the only thing that you're strengthening when you add oil, grease, and butter to the scalp are the forms of yeast and bacteria that are on the scalp. You make them stronger and stronger. You make that lipid barrier stronger. That's why sometimes it doesn't matter what you do or what a dermatologist does, the medications and the different medications that they're giving you guys to kill these different forms of bacteria, sometimes they're not even working. The lipid barrier just keeps getting stronger and stronger because you guys are mixing and making up more and more things. So I know that people like to think that like their hair is like a dead thing, but there is literally a city on your scalp, and the yeast that is on your scalp can communicate. And when you use things like oregano, these two key constituents within oregano, it blocks the yeast from being able to communicate with each other. The biofilm formation can be stopped in its tracks with oregano, because oregano, what it'll do, these two key constituents in oregano literally gets in between. It stops their passage, it stops the communication that they're having. I'll put the actual word for it here. Yeast literally communicates, like things communicate with each other to build this biofilm. But what happens is oregano lets off something here, but these two key constituents within oregano, what it does, it blocks the signal that the biofilm is trying to send to each other to formulate around this fungi or around the fungus to begin with, around the yeast to begin with. So if the signals are blocked and they can't communicate with each other to create that film, that microfilm, that microbiofilm over the yeast, then the yeast is not going to be protected. That's its whole, it basically is something, it's drug in the army. It's making the army weak and sleepy and beating all of them up so they can't fight it off. And then that way the oregano makes it way easier for you to be able to kill the yeast. So by you ingesting oregano on a regular basis, and it's super easy, like I have it right here in my tea, right? But you can also just add a couple of drops to it, to your water every day. It is tasteless. You really can't even taste it. Or you could get out the way and just put a couple of drops right under your tongue and then let it sit for about 20 seconds and then drink some water and keep on going about your day. But what it will do, it will help your body to be able to break down that excess yeast from the inside out. So if you have an overproduction of yeast, it is amazing for that. Now, I do not recommend putting any of my products in your hair, especially oils and butters, right? Especially oils and butters, especially herbs and things of that nature. I do not sell hair products, and none of my products are supposed to go in the hair and in the scalp. But when we're talking about extracts and tinctures, the extracts, the different things that you see on your website, on the ingredient list of certain products, they're not just taking avocados and pouring avocados in there. Like, no, it's not straight avocado oil. They use an extract or they use a tincture where they pull out the key constituents of whatever that is. In this case, we're talking about oregano, and that is what we did with this oregano extract. With this oregano extract, I pulled out all of the key constituents of oregano and I put them in one bottle. And what this is going to do is help you to destroy the yeast within your body. With oregano, yeast in your body does not stand a chance. The actual cell membrane itself is destroyed with oregano. Something super simple, right? But again, check the video in the link in the description box below so you can hear even more about oregano and you can learn even more about my blend with oregano, because that one's with spearmint and oregano, and it is amazing, right? Make sure that you keep your scalp clean and clear and free of different fats, right? If you are a person who loves coconut oil in your hair, coconut oil is a protein seeking fatty oil, and the yeast that is in your scalp loves it. The only thing you do is feed yeast and bacteria. That's why there are certain women, right, who say, oh my God, I used coconut oil in my hair one time, my scalp was on fire, it's never been the same since. Well, now you know why. It's made even more powerful by oil. So I hope that we learned in this series that even though they made you believe on social media that you are strengthening your follicle or you're strengthening your hair by adding oils and greases and butters, I don't care what anybody says. The only thing that you do for certain by adding oils and butters to the scalp is feeding the yeast and bacteria that lives there. Yes, these oils and butters have amazing properties, but guess what? The different forms of yeast and bacteria are breaking down and metabolizing the oils and the butters that you're putting on your scalp better than the follicle is actually able to, because where your body actually metabolizes different foods and different things like that is within the gut. Most topical treatments that are put on the scalp are only there to kill overgrowths of bacteria, yeast, and different things of that nature, but it is really known that you can get all of the different nutrients that you need to build these proteins, which are your hair within your gut. Remember, after every video that I make, I'm always going to tell you guys about what I have for you in the apothecary. You know why? There are so many different amino acids and amazing different botanicals and vitamins and minerals and everything that's in my apothecary. And always remember, all right, amino acids create polypeptides, and polypeptides create proteins, and we are creating proteins. And what are proteins? Our hair, skin, and nails. So if you want to have healthy hair, skin, and nails, make sure that you balance your body's natural microbiome. And how do you do that? In the apothecary, baby. I love you, and I'll see you later.